Welcome back to the Learning Military channel. In the last episode, we took a look at some of the capabilities, the expectations, and options that the U.S. Navy has right now to be able to provide naval surface fire support. What we learned is that there is a major gap between what is needed and what the U.S. Navy can currently do. So in this episode, we're going to look at some of the various programs and proposals that have been considered to try and fill this gap. I'll warn you now, though, some of this isn't pretty either, so hang on so you can see what I'm talking about. But before I do want to remind everybody that in the description below, you will find a link to Patreon. If you are able to help support me financially, that goes to help out with tuition costs, books, things like that, because this is something that I am doing for academic research for the university that I attend. I also feel like this is important for civilians to know some of the challenges that the military is facing so we can kind of make informed decisions. So if there is something that you could do financially to either help out my education or to help out this channel, that is the best place to do it. At the same time, this is also a YouTube channel, obviously, so I'm going to ask you guys to like the video if this is interesting to you, and also subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified when future videos come out. For example, the next episode that I'm working on is taking a look at some of the war games and other information that's publicly available on what we would expect a war with Iran to look like. Pretty interesting stuff. So come back for that by hitting, again, the subscribe button and the bell icon. Okay, so now getting back to it, let's just do a quick review of what we talked about in the previous episode for requirements. Just as a reminder, since this is part 2, I definitely recommend you guys go back and watch the first video if you haven't gotten to yet, so some of this is going to make more sense to you. So what the requirements that have been set out by the United States Marine Corps and the United States Navy for effective fire support requires us to be able to have a weapon that fires a projectile somewhere within the range of 41 to 63 nautical miles. In the future, that will likely expand to 200 nautical miles, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. This weapon should also be able to be fired within 2.5 minutes after a call for fire support comes in. And each fire support mission right now takes about 22 rounds to complete. The frequency of fire support does vary over time. For example, in an amphibious assault at its most intense phase, it is expected that a call for fire support will likely come in about every 4.5 minutes. That obviously does diminish over time, but we're going to use that 4.5 minutes as the standard for which we'll compare some of the various solutions in this particular episode. Now, one of the conclusions that we made at the end of the last video was that we do not have anything that really meets all of these requirements. So what we're going to take a look at here is what has been proposed to solve the issue after the Iowa Class Battleships have been retired. The first program we're going to take a look at is called the Extended Range Guided Munition, or ERGM program. When this program was first launched in 1994, the main selling point of ERGM was that the Navy could use modified versions of the 5-inch guns currently on board their vessel and a new projectile. Fire support could be provided at a much longer range, and fire was far more accurate. Therefore, less rounds would be needed, and that could potentially save some money over time, since again, you're not firing as many projectiles at a target. One of the things that made ERGM revolutionary was that it would be able to be fired out of a ship's 5-inch gun, and a solid rocket engine would activate, propelling it upwards in the air. Fins would then deploy, and the weapon would be guided through GPS to its target. And that accuracy was approximately within the range of 4 meters of its intended target, so really not that bad. In essence, what ERGM was, and I do mean this very, very crudely though, is that you're basically firing a guided missile out of a 5-inch gun. Remember, it has its own rocket and is guided into a target, much like a Tomahawk missile is. Now, the premise of ERGM, I feel, is a smart one. The weapon systems to deliver the round didn't really need to change that much, so just about any ship in the fleet could leverage ERGM. ERGM could travel about 60 nautical miles, which is within the range that we talked about earlier, set by the United States Marine Corps. It could also travel faster than a Tomahawk missile, which would make it more difficult to counter by hostile forces, and it was obviously more accurate than an unguided projectile. Now, over 14 years and repeated tests, technical challenges really plagued ERGM. For example, as you can imagine, the concussive force of being shot out of a 5-inch gun proved to be a real challenge for some of the specific and very accurate pieces of the ERGM, or pieces that really couldn't be changed that much, like the fins and the rockets. So this weapon ended up not being effective. And to solve this issue, though, it meant increasing the cost of the round, which in 2006 was approximately $191,000 a round already. With all of these issues, the program was scrapped in 2008, and ERGM at that point was dead. Towards the end of the ERGM program, a series of projects were being initiated that claimed to drastically improve naval surface fire support and would revolutionize surface warfare. Known as the Zumwalt class, Business Insider described it as multi-mission ships focusing primarily on land attack and naval gunfire support missions with secondary anti-ship and anti-aircraft mission capabilities. That sounds great. I mean, this is exactly what we're trying to talk about, and this class of warship was supposed to solve those problems. It was a unique design that allowed it to stealthily approach shore or a particular target and fire off a round called the long-range land attack projectile. Now, this projectile would be fired out of a unique and new 155mm advanced gun system. The long-range land attack projectile had some of the same capabilities of ERGM, being that it would be shot out of a gun, this time out of a 155mm rather than 5-inch gun, and it would be rocket-propelled and guided via GPS to a target. The range, though, of this projectile was improved over ERGM with a range of somewhere between 73 and 84 nautical miles. Many of the technical issues with ERGM seem to have been resolved with the long-range land attack projectile, but costs escalated to where each round cost about $1 million a shot. The program was canceled due to those same high costs that we were talking about with ERGM, of course, this time a lot more expensive. Not only did the Navy again find itself without a tool to provide effective naval fire support, but they now had 3 Zumwalt class ships completed, which have specialty guns and no ammunition to fire them, since the long-range land attack projectile was canceled. The Zumwalt class has kind of served as one of the worst examples of military procurement in recent times, and you can understand why. You have a ship that doesn't have any projectiles or any weapons that it can really use at this time. Now, these two examples showcase some of the things that have been tried and failed in the area of naval surface fire support. There are some programs that are in the works right now which hope to meet the Navy and the Marine Corps requirements. We'll take a look at one of them, which is the hypervelocity projectile. Much of the specifics about the hypervelocity projectile remain classified. What we do know is that it is guided and, as you can tell by the name, is able to be fired at much faster speeds than other projectiles. And it can be used actually in a wider variety of missions too. I thought this was pretty interesting, like limited anti-air operations, anti-ship warfare, and of course what we're talking about here, naval surface fire support. It was announced that the HVP, again hypervelocity projectile, was fired in tests during RIMPAC 2018 using a ship's 5-inch gun. At that time, it was traveling at about Mach 3, achieving a range of about 50 nautical miles each, and each round comes in at a significantly lower price from other experimental programs that we've talked about previously, coming in at about $86,000 a round. One of the things that makes HVP so special, though, is its ability to be encased in a shell that allows it to be fired from a 5-inch gun, a 155mm gun, or the Navy's railgun, which is currently being tested. Let's talk a little bit about the railgun here in this video to kind of talk about how hypervelocity projectile could be used with it, because the railguns, or one of the railgun's selling points is that it could be used for naval surface fire support. Now, the railgun uses electromagnetism to fire the high-velocity projectile, and when it does so, it really does showcase what the hypervelocity projectile can do. The HVP can travel at speeds of Mach 7.3 from what I was able to find, and it can achieve a range of about 100 nautical miles. While HVP has had some successful trials, the railgun itself has a much longer way to go before it can be used. For example, I was able to find in congressional reports issues have arisen about how to provide power to the gun for multiple fire missions, that there have been issues with the integrity of the railgun itself after a few shots have been fired, and there have been some other things that really show that the railgun is far from being ready to be used on the high seas. This flexibility of HVP is its greatest selling point right now. While yes, the capabilities of HVP are greatly enhanced when fired out of a railgun, remember it can still be used with existing weapons right now, so some of the capabilities and benefits of HVP can be leveraged as soon as it goes into full production with or without the railgun. While HVP is still being tested and evaluated though, the problem that still exists is what can be done right now to provide naval fire support that meets the existing requirements that we talked about earlier. One of the things that have also been brought forward is bringing back the Iowa Class Battleships until this gets resolved. Should we do that? Absolutely not. While the Iowa Class ships are able to fire larger projectiles much farther than our current ships do, it's still not enough. Remember, the 5-inch guns aboard our ships today have a range of 13 nautical miles. The Iowa class vessels can fire a projectile from their 16-inch guns at a range of 21 nautical miles. That difference in range is significant, but even at 21 nautical miles, it is still not enough to meet the minimum requirements set forth by the United States Marine Corps and the United States Navy. I will admit, though, we are starting to get closer to what I feel is the best solution that I was able to find on how to provide effective naval fire support using existing technology. To understand what this solution is, we got to really quickly take a look at the evolution of the battleship. So originally, battleships were designed to be these massive ships that would do battle on the high seas against other surface vessels, and through heavy armor and massive guns, they would end up being victorious. But because of the aircraft carrier and guided missiles, quickly the battleships fell into obsolescence and not able to fulfill those roles effectively. So how they were used was primarily as floating artillery platforms that could provide naval fire support. So what I was able to find on thenavalist.com was an article that was written by a man named Commander Patton, who basically proposes that we build just that, naval surface fire support artillery platforms. Here's some of the drawings that he had in his article, which I think are really, really cool. Because what he does is he proposes basically taking cargo vessels or large oil tankers and converting them into these artillery platforms. Now, using today's technology, such a vessel could be easily built. You could go ahead and comprise it of 155 millimeter guns, and the Navy right now could leverage the Excalibur round that's used by the Army and the Marine Corps. That same 155 millimeter gun could later fire the hypervelocity projectile that we talked about too, and that could provide some additional flexibility and firepower to the ship. This new ship could also be armed with a multiple launch rocket system that is similar to the one found in HIMARS or the M270. And for longer range, you can have VLS cells on board the ship that could be used to house Tomahawk missiles. One of the things that I absolutely love about this proposal is if you take a look at some of the main issues that have been brought up with our current capabilities at providing naval surface fire support, and again, you can see that in this episode and the last episode, with this proposal of having a naval artillery platform, all of those issues are basically thrown out the window. That's why I think that this proposal by Commander Patton is one of the best and most innovative ones that are out there on how we can bridge the gap between what is needed for naval surface fire support and what our current capabilities really are. In a great power struggle in the 21st century, amphibious assaults are going to be extremely costly, so anything that we can do to try and help protect the Marines and other troops that might be going ashore, the better. So mad props to Commander Patton for really coming up with this. This was absolutely awesome to be able to research. This was something I didn't know that much about going into it, so I hope that you learned some stuff from it too, because again, I learned quite a bit. And this is one of the reasons why I love the Learning Military channel. So more to come, obviously, later on, as I kind of teased at the beginning. In the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at some of the information available on some war games that have been done, and also what some experts think that a war with Iran could potentially look like. It's pretty relevant with all of the current events going on right now, so I hope you come back for that one. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when that episode comes out. Like the video if this was a video that you enjoyed or you learned something by watching. And then, of course, the description below, you will see the link to Patreon, as well as to a Discord that I have with another YouTube channel that I run too. So kind of merging the two communities there. Anyway, thanks for watching, and remember, I've got your 6.